it was like a dream. Like, yeah, we like, can you imagine being like wrestlers?
Yeah, because I think our mindset was like most other people's. Oh, you know, wrestling's fake.
I remember walking into second day's training and Zach's like laughing at us, going, "How you feeling, boys?" And we were like, "Yeah, not good." It wasn't always the easiest to grow up in a predominantly white city.
Obviously, we sort of stand out in a crowd, so in a wrestling sense, that's always a good thing. That was them who said, well, you can't be singles wrestlers because you look exactly alike, so you have to be a tag team.
We are different. We are like Singh, we are Indian. We can come out with the Bhangra music playing, we can come out of the door and, you know, we've got the swords on our wrestling gear and we wear Shivanya and everything makes us unique.
But success for me would be people to say, the Foji done that, you know, why can't we do it? So
my guests today are tag team partners and brothers from Norwich. They're training under the parents of Paige from WWE. They proudly represent their Sikh faith through the art of wrestling. They hope to reach the heights of the WWE one day. Welcome to the Foji brothers, Rishpal and Onkar.
Thank you for having us.
No worries, no worries. So what I like to do is just take it right back to what you were like as kids and growing up. And I imagine ending up as wrestlers that you probably practice moves on each other's growing up. So just talk about growing up together, I guess.
Yeah, so I mean, I was pretty much born into wrestling. I don't remember a time where I didn't watch it because my brother's obviously older than me, so he started watching it, and then I just, you know, I've always been into it. So I grew up watching it. Naturally, we obviously tried out a few of the moves on each other, and yeah, I can't remember a time where wrestling wasn't part of my life, really.
Yeah, I remember being quite young and going around one of my cousins' houses, and they were watching it, and that was the first time I ever saw it. And then from then, I was just hooked, and we just started watching it at home as well. So yeah, I was probably about 4 or 5 when I started watching it.
And whose moves were you emulating? Who was your favorite fighters when you were growing up watching it?
So for me, the guy who's always stood out has been The Undertaker. He's always been the standout character, and for me, like growing up, even like sort of at a young age, his character was a bit like you weren't really sure what he was going to do, but as you get older, you appreciate the character more, you appreciate his wrestling more. So for me, he's always been the guy.
For me, it was Bret Hart. He was stood out because just his general style and like his character, like the fact that he wore like pink and black was like completely standout for that time and for like compared to the rest of the roster. So yeah, like growing up, he was definitely my favorite wrestler. Yeah.
I think that era of wrestling definitely was like one of the better eras, like the Attitude Era going into it. Like so I'm 24. I think you were a bit older than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that era was just obviously I have older brothers. They were like 5 years older than me, so that they were watching pretty much and got me into that era of wrestling. But it was definitely the best time. Like I remember for me it was like Eddie Guerrero and RVD. I used to like the more like acrobatic wrestlers. When Rey Mysterio came in, he was flying all over the place. I was just addicted to it.
I think wrestling's changed so much because when we got into it, it was more about characters. Mm-hmm. And it was about, you know, the characters were the sort of the main thing. But as time's gone on, it's been more about acrobatics, like you say, and different styles of wrestling and things.
I think, yeah, like back in that era, like sort of pre-Attitude Era, but going into the Attitude Era, they were all these big, huge, muscly guys, and that's completely changed now. A lot of the wrestlers are a lot smaller and quicker. Yeah. The whole style's changed. It's not just about power and strength, and technical wrestling is about like speed and making it more exciting. And yeah, it definitely has changed. And I think them guys you said, like Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, RVD, they're the ones that sort of changed that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. When you were growing up, did you ever imagine that this is what you were going to do eventually? Like when you were of like a really young age when you were watching it, or was it just like as time went on, you slowly got into it more and more?
I don't think we ever really thought we were going to do it, like, try and do it for a living. It was just one of them things that we enjoyed watching and occasionally trying. But it only it only sort of really became like a possibility is when Paige got signed, because obviously she's from Norwich, from our city, and we started to find out about how she trained and things, and that was when it really sort of the light bulb sort of went on, and we thought we could possibly try this. But up until then, I don't think we never really thought.
I think even for a while after Paige had gone to WWE, we never really thought that like we would do it, and like even if we thought we would go and try it, we never thought we would actually do it, like start wrestling properly. So I mean, for us growing up, it was just like it was like a dream. Like we like, can you imagine being like wrestlers? But we never really thought it was like a possibility, to be honest.
So the movie that came out is with Paige and the forgot what his family.
Fighting with my family.
Fighting with your family. That is it. Is that like a fair representation? Obviously, that was probably earlier when she's in Norwich. That's probably like an earlier version of how she was training and how the family setup was. But is it genuinely like a fair depiction of what you experienced when you were with her parents, training under her parents, or is it very much Hollywoodified?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they add a little bit extra. They kind of have to, but
there's always
it was pretty fair, to be fair. Like it was pretty close to how they actually are.
The characters are, I think, very well like portrayed. Like that is sort of them. It is obviously dialed up for the film, but I think they've done a pretty good job of most of the characters. Yeah.
Sick. And then because you weren't expecting to sort of go into the route when you were kids, did you ever like look at tag teams and picture yourself? Because I imagine that like when you're growing up, you always think of the solo sort of wrestlers, so like the Rocks or the Undertaker, as you said, and the Bret Hart. Do you ever look at tag teams and like, because if you have cousins coming over and used to a one tag team and they're another tag team, or was that just not a thing for you?
I think for me the first tag team that I was blown away by was the Hardy Boys. And the Hardy Boys, obviously they're brothers as well, so there's that. But it's just like you were saying earlier about the people who fly, like, their style was so different to anyone who had been in there before them. And I thought like when they were younger, especially, like some of their matches, like they would have the TLC matches with the Dudley Boys and Edge and Christian and all that. Them tag teams, they were the first ones that sort of changed the game for me. Growing up, it was like I said, I used to like Bret Hart, so he had like the Hart Foundation and teams like that. But once we were by the time we were at the age where we were a bit more into it, for me, definitely the Hardy Boys, I think.
Yeah, I think previous to that, I mean, like you said, they were tag teams out there. Like the Legion of Doom always stand out for me. They were obviously like an iconic tag team. But I think Edge and Christian and the Hardys and the Dudleys, they sort of put tag team wrestling on the map because it was kind of just a bit of a gimmick match before and no one really sort of took it seriously. But they kind of made it sort of mainstream, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I remember when, like, again, growing up, that era was definitely dominant. I was looking forward to tag team wrestling because I knew Jeff Hardy would be on the top of a ladder doing a swanton bomb. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you just get surprised every single time. You're like, how is he still wrestling next week? Do you know what I mean? Like, shouldn't he be in a coma or something? But every week he's just
even now he's still doing it, and you think it's mad.
It's crazy.
It's mad.
Did you? Because he had both of them actually had a stint in TNA. Were you just focus on WWF growing up, or did you ever like dabble in other ones like WCW, TNA, or anything else?
We never really watched WCW. We were always very much WWE. We have always been WWE, to be fair. I mean, we don't sort of shy away from other promotions. We have watched TNA in the past. I think when TNA was at its peak, that was quite a decent watch. And now with AEW as well, we'll give it a watch sometimes, but primarily it has always been WWE for us.
I think obviously growing up around with that sort of age, so WCW, when we didn't really watch it, but when more and more of like the WWF wrestlers started moving across to WCW, is when we start following it a bit more, and sort of we didn't watch it weekly like how we did with WWF, but we did follow it. And it's the same with TNA really. As like some bigger names went in there, we started following that a bit. And now sort of we tend to watch WWE more. But AEW, we watch that. That's a good alternative. So
there's a few. Is Chris Jericho in there now with AEW?
AEW,
yeah. Because I remember like back in the day when TNA was starting to pop off, it was like the Hardy Brothers were there, Kurt Angle was there. So like you naturally go to where your favorite wrestlers are going, because obviously you want to watch exciting wrestling. And I'm pretty sure they had a game back in the day as well, TNA, because it were actually doing really, really good at one point. And if you had to like narrow down to one move, I imagine it's probably like your favorite wrestler's finishing move. But what would you say is like your one favorite move when you were a kid, and has that changed over time as more like you've got into wrestling and understand the technical side of things?
So for me, when I was younger, and he can probably like testify to it, that the sharpshooter, Bret Hart was my favourite, and it was a sharpshooter, so I would always put him in a sharpshooter. But yeah, I mean, growing up, the sharpshooter is still like a great move, especially sort of getting to do it and learn how to do it properly. It's actually like one of the best like submission moves, like one of the hardest to get out of, and one of the most painful to be in. So it is a great move. Other than that, like for me, one of the most impactful finisher moves was Shawn Michaels' switching music. Because for me, I was like, whoever you're going to get kicked in the face like that, like kicked in the face that hard, that genuinely would probably knock you out. So them two for me.
Yeah, I think when you're watching it, it's just kind of whatever moves or wows you most. But I think when we started training in that, because you kind of taught, well, the way we were taught was, the wrestling way of doing it, the professional wrestling way, and then the legit way of doing it. So I think you have an appreciation for how strong the actual move is. Like you said with the sharpshooter, if you were to legit put that on someone, there would be no way out. Like they wouldn't be able to get out of it. So you have a different appreciation for the moves, I think.
So what is the move that wowed you as a kid, and then what was the move that, looking back technically, other than the sharpshooter, that you thought was amazing?
To be fair, it was probably the Swanton Bomb from Jeff Hardy, because it was the first thing where it was like he used to fly, and like no one really used to do that. So that was probably gave me the wow factor. In terms of like legit moves, like you say, to be honest, any kind of submission, they look like sort of, you can do this to get out of it, you can do that to get out of it. But when you're actually in it,
if it's put on properly,
there isn't any way out. So I can't really pinpoint one that stands out to me, but just the appreciation for submission moves in general, that grew a lot when I started wrestling.
As a tag team, it's probably hard for you to implement submissions, because when you're watching wrestling, or when I was growing up watching wrestling, it's always like you're on the brink of them tapping out, and then the other tag team comes in and just ruins it, sort of thing. So that was obviously probably a lot easier to implement in a singles match than a tag team match.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely
is. Yeah, like you said, a submission is going to take time to get anybody to submit and tap out. So it's always going to be difficult if they've got a tag team partner who can come in and break up the hold. So
I think that's what makes tag team wrestling more fun as well, is that you always have them moments where you think, is the partner going to come in? Whereas when it's a singles match, either he's going to get out of it or he's going to tap out. So I think tag team matches always give you that chance that something else can happen.
The pile, going back to Undertaker, the pile driver as well was one that I always got like. I watched it and it made me cringe a lot of the time, just because of how the head position. And did they end up stopping that because somebody's neck broke, or was that one of them like rumors where they just stopped it for a while and then integrated it back in when everyone forgot?
So I think the tombstone they kept because there is a way of doing it, obviously more safely. I think it's the reverse where you do the pile driver, which they banned because I think a couple of wrestlers broke their necks when
a few
doing
people,
that.
yeah, a few wrestlers broke their neck. Stone Cold Steve Austin actually broke his neck from a pile driver, and there was a few other ones. So yeah, the pile driver was banned. Yeah.
I don't think it's banned in all promotions. I think it's just the WWE, so you do see it still.
I think
in a lot of the other promotions.
In general, in the wrestling community, is quite widely banned. But yeah, you probably would find it in some promotions. Yeah.
Is that where like the guy who is pile driving has his legs forward instead of back? I think that's
yeah. So it's basically a tombstone, but the other way.
Yeah. And then like, how did you, when you got to the age where you wanted to actually start pursuing it, and as you said, you seen Paige sign a contract with the WWE and you wanted to take it seriously, how did you take the step from beating each other in your living room to going to actually like train and learn the art of wrestling?
So obviously we found out about WAW, which is the promotion based in Norwich, and when she signed, and we just sort of talked about it a couple of times. And then we just decided that we just one day, we didn't even think that we were still going to do it professionally. We just thought we'd go down and check it out and see what it's like and see what it's all about. So,
like for us, like we were discussing, weren't we? Like, let's just go. They do training weekends, so basically you go for the weekend, you train Saturday, Sunday, and we were just thinking, well, we'll go for the weekend and like just to see what it's like to how they actually wrestle. But we never really thought we were going to stick with it, like to actually do it and actually try to become wrestlers.
Yeah, so when we went down there, we met Ricky Knight, who's the founder, Paige's dad, and they welcomed us with like open arms. It was crazy because we live in a city where there isn't that much of a diverse community. Obviously, we sort of stand out in a crowd. So in a wrestling sense, that's always a good thing. And yeah, so they just really liked our look, and they said, "Are you coming back for the next training weekend?" And we were like, "Yeah, I guess so." And they just really, really pushed us and told us that there could be a future in this business for us. So that obviously brought us back for more.
Going back to the diversity thing that you touched on there, I was surprised myself when I seen news on Instagram that you're from Norwich, because I didn't think there was a big Sikh community or Apana community in general in Norwich. Is that something that was like evident when you were growing up? Like, could you feel like that you were the only ones, were the only ones there, sort of thing?
Yeah, I think growing up there was. Yeah, I mean, as a kid, you don't really notice it, but sort of as you get into your teen years and things, you start really picking up on it. It is, yeah.
It wasn't always the easiest.
Yeah.
It wasn't always the easiest to grow up in a predominantly white city where people aren't very. It's a lot better now, but they weren't very educated to other religions and other cultures because there was so little. It's definitely becoming more diverse now. But it wasn't the easiest, like going through teen years and things like that. So yeah, you definitely felt it.
And then like what age, so how long ago did you start when you went for that initial weekend? Like what age was that, or how long ago was that?
That was in
2016?
2015 possibly. 2015 I think it was, yeah.
Fairly recent.
Literally, I think right at the end, I think November, December time we went.
Yeah.
So.
And then you just caught the bug when you were there, basically, and just never looked back.
Yeah, so obviously we enjoyed the weekend. It was, for one thing, it was like such a shock to the system how sore we were. Like after that first day, we could barely like walk. Like our bodies were aching.
I remember like struggling to get out of bed after the Saturday's training, thinking, I don't know if I can go to Sunday because it was like my whole back had seized up. You could hardly walk. I remember walking into second day's training and Zach's like laughing at us, going, "How are you feeling, boys?" And we were like, "Yeah, not good."
Yeah, because I think our mindset was like most other people's. Oh, wrestling's fake. Well, it's going to be fine. And then when we when we were there, it was a real eye opener as to how physical it really is. But in terms of what sort of brought us back was, like I say, it was just the nights and how they kind of encouraged us and sort of really gave us the confidence to carry on, to come back, because they kind of, as soon as they saw us, they're like, oh, you could be something, you could have a future in this business. And that's not something that you hear every day. It's not something we were expecting to hear at all.
I think it's like, it's not just Norwich not being diverse, it's wrestling in general is only recently becoming more diverse. And even when there was other cultures and other sort of, not religions, but other sort of I guess cultures sort of represented in wrestling, is very stereotypical. And almost like in a sort of comedic way. They were all portrayed like in comedic ways, I feel. Weren't always given like a serious go at it. So for us, like, it was a chance to
that was always
stand out, because that's what they said. Like, there's no one like us in terms of like being full Sikh and Sardar and stuff. Like, there is no one like that in wrestling in general. So it definitely, like, it was a chance to sort of get into a new market. And I think as a company and as a business, they sort of saw that when they saw us. So
and I think in terms of the stereotypical stuff, that's one thing that we instantly put out there, that we didn't want to go down that route. We didn't want to do the the dancing and the curly shoes and all that kind of stuff, because it's been done, and also it's not a true depiction of the Asian community. Is everyone they're Indian, so they must dance a lot and they must not take much seriously. So we wanted to stay away from that, and yes, go out, be proud of who we are, but also be legit, genuine wrestlers,
be taken seriously.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I noticed as well. Like, you obviously have the predominantly white sort of wrestlers. That's like the majority of the roster. But then when there was other ethnicities, it was very much like you said, it was a bit stereotypical. So like, there would be the luchadors, and they would be like the Mexican wrestlers, and they'd just be flying about like the Rey Mysterios, or there'd be like Japanese was a very popular sort of wrestling unit, and then suddenly you've got Takeshi, who looks like not Takeshi, Rikishi, that looks like a sumo, and then like every like sort of, you've got like what's it called, Sheamus and Finley and the little leprechaun that they had. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was all like stereotypical all the time. And then I think what was good when the Great Khali came in is that he actually couldn't speak any English, or very little. So I think that actually worked out in his favor, because I think if he could, he might have went down the more like those singing and dancing way that you said, like maybe like the more Jinder Mahal route of like overtly sort of like flamboyant and like more Bollywood than Indian, because all the countries that I mentioned, like Mexico and Japan, do have like a strong wrestling sort of history, but so does India. You know what I mean? Like, we do have a really strong like kabaddis are like in our genes is like Punjabi.
Definitely.
But that's not really represented like authentically, I think, in the Western markets yet. But hopefully, like going forward, I think, as you say, everyone now, probably in the fear of getting cancelled, but is becoming more aware and educated, and it's only a good thing, to be fair. But
and also, just to build on that, I think as well that companies have also seen the market in India as well. Realize that there's a lot of money there, so they're trying to steer that way and like push talent and try and get talent out of India and things. So it's a good time to try and get into it.
100%. Every time that I used to visit India growing up, when I stayed at my nanke and stuff, they had like a TV, and all the time it would be just wrestling on, or like on the sports channels would just be like wrestling 24/7. Like, they love it over there. So if you can't have a few more faces, it's gonna be really, really good. I think there is I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure there's like a new Munda from India that has signed with the WWE's like talent agency, I guess. I think they have like a WWE India, don't they? Like as a thing.
Yeah, they have. They go out there and do sort of like tryouts and things like that. So they've actually signed quite a few people from India. None of them have made it to sort of like the mainstream programming yet.
I think there's a tag team. I think there's a tag team in NXT at the moment.
Yeah. But again, like fair enough to them. Like fair play. If that's what their gimmick is and that's what their look is. But again, they are very stereotypical to that Indian look and that sort of Indian image they put across, compared to like what we try to do. Like we try to like represent sort of like how we are, like British Asian, British Indian, like what our culture actually is, because it is very different to how people perceive it.
100%, definitely. The word you used there, gimmick. I wanted to ask you what is a gimmick, because when I didn't want to ask it in like an offensive way, like what's your gimmick? Because to me, when I hear like that, it doesn't sound genuine sort of thing. And you're saying that obviously you want to be authentic, but generally like in a broader wrestling sense, and then specifically to yourselves, what is a gimmick in wrestling?
So a gimmick is basically your character when you're wrestling. So sometimes it's literally something completely like wacky, like just something so different to yourself. But sometimes it is literally just yourself, but just dialed up to 10. So it varies, you know. You have like demon gimmicks, and then you have like clowns, and you have whatever. But then sometimes, like you say, with us, not just with us though, but with some wrestlers, even like within the WWE, they don't really have a gimmick. They just themselves, but they just dial it up. They're just louder and brighter and shinier.
Yeah, and you can change like if you needed to, like along the way. I guess if you're going down the authentic route, then it's probably not as appealing to change. But like, for example, like Mick Foley, he had a lot of gimmicks. Is that like Mankind was a gimmick? Dude Love is that? Am I correct in
Yeah, you're
okay.
right.
Yeah, I'm sort of asking the question to understand it myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Undertaker, you look at the Undertaker from when he started to now when he's retired, and how many different versions of him there's been.
Yeah, and he's almost went full circle as well. Like
Yeah,
sort of ended.
I think also it's not necessarily. You don't have to change like who you are as a character to change your gimmick. So like most recently for me, like if you look at Seth Rollins in WWE now, he was initially like he was just Seth Rollins. Like he was just like that. He was himself, and like obviously he was like a good guy, and like everyone got behind him even when he was bad. But his actual, he never changed like the way he looked and like the way he acted. And recently he's changed his gimmick to like a Messiah gimmick, like he's almost like Jesus Christ to wrestling. And he has like disciples and followers and stuff. But in general, he's changed like his coat, and that's probably about it. Like he doesn't have to look like a completely different person and like completely go 180 to be someone different to change his gimmick. I think that's like a skill in itself to sort of keep the same character but just take it down a different route.
What are the difference between like a gimmick and a storyline? Because another example that pops in my head is do you remember when Randy Orton went through that like what was it, legend killer phase, where he just kept on booting for like Ric Flair in the face, and then next week was like the next legend? And was that a gimmick, or was that more of a storyline? And are the two mutually exclusive, or can they be like a blend, if that makes sense?
So I think that they sometimes a storyline can lead to a gimmick. So in that instance, I think that's what happened. I think Randy Orton's storyline was that he was gonna, beat up legends, and then the tagline stuck with him, the legend killer, and then that kind of became his gimmick. So I think there is like a crossover between the two.
Yeah. And the kick in itself became like a gimmick for him. So like whenever he was going to have a match with anyone, who was an older, like a legend in wrestling, like everyone's always half expecting he's going to kick him in the head at the end, because that's almost become like an add-on to his character.
And enough half built it up as well. You would go to the corner, slither on the floor like a snake, like full on pounding, waiting for the guy to get to his knees. I remember, like, I think he did it on Vince McMahon once, and it was one of the best things I've ever watched, to be honest. Like, because obviously Vince McMahon's always portrayed as like the rich guy and like sort of like a heel. And then when he booted him in the face, I was like, yeah, go on, lad.
Yeah. I think like that kind of thing, what you say, where you built it up, and that's like such a big part of wrestling, which people don't really realize. Mm-hmm. It's not just about going in there and doing the moves. It's all the other things. There's so much you have to think about that you wouldn't really sort of associate. You think, oh, you just go in and wrestle, but so much of sort of crowd work and how you carry yourself and just the little things, they make such a difference.
Yeah, I was going to mention this before with the finishes as well. The Rock was always one of my favorites for the finishes, because the variation he would put on the people's elbow, depending on the match, like longing it out so much. Sometimes he would take his time. Sometimes he has the shades on. He would chuck them in the crowd. If not, he's got his elbow pad. Like, it's one move, but every single match almost you would see like a different variation because of the entertainment factor or the occasion. Like, if it's a pay-per-view, it's going to be extra special and things like that. But I think that's a part that I always loved, was more the theatrics behind it as well, not just the technical wrestling. Because I did love people jumping off ladders, as I say, like Jeff Hardy before, but also like those who were a bit more like theatrical in the ring as well, and made it entertaining.
At the end of the day, it is entertainment. It is a show. The same as someone would go to the theatre to watch a show, or go and see a concert, or you go to the cinema to watch a film. It's all some form of entertainment. It needs to be theatrical to keep your attention and to give you that bit of excitement. And so, yeah, I mean, you have to have that bit of showmanship, and that's quite difficult to sort of get the hang of when you first start, because you're concentrating so much on the wrestling that you're not giving that showmanship when you're doing the moves. So it takes quite a while to get it almost a second nature to sort of make everything more extravagant when you are wrestling. And like you said about The Rock, I mean, you really got to see like where he is now to see like he was a natural showman. Like I can't think of really many wrestlers who have been better on the mic, because being on the mic can be as big a part as how you actually wrestle. If you can't get your character across or make people interested in you, they don't really care what happens in your matches. So
yeah, definitely, because you see there's like, when you watch, do you see that there's like people who might not be as technically gifted as wrestlers, but because they're so entertaining, they get given like a bigger break, or vice versa? Do you see someone who's that technically gifted or a physical specimen? In my mind, I'm thinking Brock Lesnar is not exactly very entertaining, but because he is like just a physical phenomenon sort of thing, you just what's his name? Phil, is it? What's the guy? Paul Heyman, that's the one. Paul Heyman. You just hoy Paul Heyman next to him to do all the entertainment side of things.
Yeah, I think like Brock Lesnar, for example, he's of course, like Paul Heyman does all his talking and like builds him up and everything like that. But because of the character that Brock Lesnar is, that suits him down to a T, because people don't want to see him talk. People want to see him like as this beast, like who can just like rip anyone apart and throw him around the ring. And but I think, like for me, like since we started wrestling, that's changed the way I watch wrestling. You appreciate the art of it more. And actually, like Brock Lesnar is probably like one of the most underrated wrestlers in terms of how good he is technically and in his storytelling and putting characters across and stuff like that. But yeah, I think so. It is as much about talking and trying to get your characters across. But some people definitely can do that just through like an aura and a character.
But I think you have to have everything nowadays for the audience to even give you a chance. Because if you go out there and you can put on a 5-star match, and you see it all the time, you see it with people like, I'll give you an example, Apollo Crews, who's a WWE wrestler. He's such a good athlete, and his matches are always good and everything. But because his talking skills aren't as good as what other wrestlers are, he's sort of mid-card to lower card because no one's interested in him because he can't talk. Mm-hmm. So you have to have like everything. If not, the fans would just eat you alive, because I think that's become so important to fans now, whereas back in the day, it wasn't as important. They didn't care if you can talk, if you could go in and wrestle, that was the main thing. But that's, I think, the biggest change in wrestling over the last 10 years or so, is fans now demand that you are good at everything. If not, you've not really got a chance.
You can't just sort of blag it with the gift of the gab and be entertaining. You need to have the technical side to back it up.
Yeah, and the same on the flip side to that as well.
Mm-hmm. So for yourselves, what aspect, I heard you talking before that you were struggling more with the entertainment side when you were getting into it first, but is that just because you, as you said, you were focusing that much on the moves themselves? Then over time, when it becomes second nature, is that when you can start to focus more on the entertainment, or do you have to do them simultaneously because, like you said, you need to be the full package?
Yeah, so when you're wrestling, you have to take into account everything. So not only do you have to sort of take into account primarily the safety of everyone involved in the match, because you're trusting your opponents are trusting you with their body. So you have to take that into account, number one. But then also you have to remember certain spots that you're supposed to do. But then you also have to remember, what are the crowd seeing? Can they see what I'm doing? Because they need to be able to see. They need to be able to see my facial expressions. I need to interact with them at a certain point, so they're not feeling like left out or bored. Like, there's so much that goes into it. So when you get in the ring, it's very easy to focus on just you. Right? I need to do this and this. But then the match for the fans isn't as fun because you haven't interacted with them or given them a chance to be part of it.
Does it make it easier as a tag team, because then the pressure is sort of divided a bit more, not just between you two, but the other two that you were going against as well? So it's not just two of you in there, but like, say if there's need crowd engagement, the one who's on the sideline can sort of like cheer the crowd up and things, and then if there is certain things that you're lacking on, maybe when you're going in for a tag, you can sort of whisper things into each other's ears to like focus on this or something like that. Does that make it easier than like a singles match? And also, have you actually participated in single matches, or have you just done tag teams so far?
So yeah, I think being in a tag team does help in that sense, because if you are in the ring and you want to sort of concentrate more on the wrestling, then you have got that other person to be trying to G the crowd up, or if you're getting beat up in the ring, then you've got that partner to sort of be like, come on, get the crowd behind you. And so yeah, in that sense, definitely, I think it's different, I guess, because when you're a singles wrestler, the crowd feels like they have to urge you on more, I feel like, because they're all you've got is the crowd. When you've got a partner, I think sometimes that takes that partner to sort of get the crowd going in a tag team match. But yeah, we both have had singles, not loads of singles matches, but we have had singles matches, yeah.
Have you predominantly focused on tag team because that's like that's your like more appealing to have brothers as tag team partners?
To be honest with you, it sounds stupid, but when we went into for our first day, we haven't really thought about being a tag team or anything. Like, we didn't even put that together. That was them who said, well, you can't be singles wrestlers because you look exactly alike, so you have to be a tag team. And we didn't even really ever think about it. So, but yeah, in terms of wrestling, sort of singles wrestlers, that's quite a bit of a shock to the system, because you're so used to, like you say, having that person to rely on to tag out and sort of catch your breath and stuff. But when you're doing it and it's just you, it's quite hard. But it's definitely a good thing. I think it only helps your wrestling you have to sort of experience wrestling as a single wrestler to get the sort of an all-round.
Yeah, I think you learn a lot as a single wrestler. First of all, how tiring it is because you don't get that break on the outside, but also sort of getting used to having to work the crowd yourself. Getting them to react how you want them to react, and getting them to sort of go with the ups and then come down to the lows, and without that person on the side almost like getting them to do it for you and shouting, like almost telling them what to do. That's all down to you through your own actions. So definitely, I feel like you learn a lot more about yourself as a wrestler and how to do them things in a singles match.
Yeah, it makes sense, to be fair, to have like a more well-rounded sort of experience. As you were saying before, you can't just rely on like one thing just technically and like energy-wise, but it does make sense to have that like singles experience as well, and that probably only make you better as a tag team. I think some of the better tag teams like historically have been ones that are like two very powerful sort of single artists, and then they join together. Like Christian and Edge were like sort of singles, and then they came together.
Yeah.
The Brothers of Destruction was probably one of my favorite like sort of time periods when them two came together as well. Going back to your second day when you were aching, and you're going back to that gym where you can't feel your back and you can't feel your legs. Over time, like, did you go in as like fairly skinny guys and then have to build up your frame, or like how have you sort of had to adjust your physiques to sort of accommodate wrestling?
So we were sort of gymming before we started wrestling, but I think we had to sort of step it up once we started wrestling. So we had to definitely bulk up because there's a lot of supporting each other's body weights and things, and if you're not up to it, obviously it's very dangerous. So
it's as much like being strength, like having strength and being like stable in the ring, as much as like aesthetics. I think as much as like for me, aesthetics became more important once we started wrestling, because of the fact that you're wearing lycra, and if you're out of shape, everyone can see. So.
Yeah, I think it's more important. Like the main thing about wrestling is being safe. I think you can go in there and be safe, and your opponent knows that you're a safe wrestler. That's the most important thing. And then once you know that you're safe, then you can worry about sort of flying around and jumping off the top and all that kind of stuff. That all comes later. But I think to start off with, build a solid base and make sure that you're safe to work with. That was the first thing that we learned, really.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's what that's actually surprising that you said that you focus on the aesthetics when you got into wrestling, because I would have thought it was the other way around. Like if you were gymming beforehand, that would probably be for the aesthetics, like getting big biceps and all that, and then getting big arms and all that. But then when you get into wrestling, realizing that like, oh, I need to work on my core because I need to like support this other person. So it's surprising that you actually said it the opposite way around.
No, I think like you said, like when you go to the gym normally, like obviously you train to get stronger and bigger, and of course you want to have like the bigger arms and bigger shoulders and stuff. I meant like more like when we got into wrestling, it was more like, oh, we need to get a bit leaner and so that you look a bit better in your wrestling gear. It's not just about looking bigger, like if in general day-to-day life you're wearing t-shirts and jumpers and things like that. That's what I meant in terms of aesthetics. But in terms of like strength and conditioning was a big one for me. You don't realize how strenuous it is when you're wrestling, because it's like a blend of all exercises. It's like you need the strength and like the power training and powerlifting, but then you also need to have that stamina and sort of agility, and you're almost doing everything at the same time. It's like, you know, feels like you've been sprinting for like an hour, but at the same time you've been trying to lift weights, and it's very, very tiring. You don't realize like you've been in there a few minutes and you're sweating, and it's so tiring.
I think endurance is literally the main thing when it comes to wrestling, because if you've had like a 20-minute match or something, towards the end of it you have to catch someone,
Yeah.
you are absolutely knackered by that point, but you have to catch them because obviously, you know, it's dangerous if not. So endurance is definitely the main thing that you have to focus on.
Is that like roughly the average time length of a match, like 20 minutes? Because I know like some can obviously go on for ages, but would you say like around 20 minutes is the sort of the sweet spot?
I think if you get a 20-minute match in wrestling, you're lucky.
Right. Okay.
we
So it's less
we
than that.
get I mean, usually you're looking at, I don't know, 6 to 7 minutes, possibly longer. At sort of like a bigger event, you might get 10 to 12. But usually they're not that long wrestling matches.
I mean, it can go, like, I think we've probably had like 4 or 5 minutes is probably the shortest match we've had. And probably about 25 minutes is probably the longest. 25 minutes, half an hour is probably the longest. So,
that's at sort of the independent level, anyways. From what we know, I mean, obviously, when you get to the big leagues, you get more time, TV time, and things. But at sort of the independent shows, that's sort of the time frames that you're looking at.
And you were saying that like you obviously have to do pretty much a bit of everything. So like, how did your training sort of change? Like, have you dabbled in like CrossFit or something like that? Because that seems to encapsulate most of what you were saying as like high intensity, but a lot of strength training and it's probably like interval a bit. Do you know what I mean? So that seems like it would be like a good fit into wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, we've considered doing CrossFit.
Right.
We haven't actually done CrossFit. But yeah, I know a lot of wrestlers have taken up CrossFit because it is definitely like in terms of strengthening your core and your stamina and your like lifting strength and stuff like that. It definitely does fit well around wrestling. It's also a lot better for your body and your joints than weightlifting. To be honest, like at the beginning, we did change some of our training for a bit more endurance. At the beginning of the year, we started working with a PT to sort of improve our durability and our agility. And they were like two of the areas where we felt like we could improve the most, as well as like continuing to get leaner and sort of put on lean muscle. So we did start working with PT at the beginning of the year. And obviously it's all gone a bit pear-shaped because of the lockdown and with like gyms closing and things like that. But yeah, you do try to tailor it around it, because if you just go in the gym and lift loads of weight and bulk up, you might look really good, but when you get in the ring, you're not going to be nimble, and you'll probably be knackered after about 3 minutes. So it's not really what you need in terms of if you're going to put on a good match. So.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I was thinking as well. Like, I'd struggle to see how some of the bigger wrestlers can maintain their endurance for so long, but it's obviously a testament to their cardio. One of my mates up here, he's got a gym and he's a PT, and he's like dabbled in a bit of everything, like the traditional weight training, bodybuilding. That's like pretty much how we started becoming friends when we were going to the gym together. And then he started getting into CrossFit, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you should try this workout." And I was like, okay, I don't know what the crack is here. Like, I'll give it a go though. And like 2 minutes into like a 20-minute EMOM, I was like, no, I'm tapping out. I can't do anymore. I think it's grueling. But it seems like when I've seen other sort of wrestlers work out and things, and like they're behind the scenes of their training programs, other than maybe like some of the freaks like John Cena, all I've seen of him is just lifting ridiculous weight, which I don't understand how he's so fast in the ring, because I've seen him do like a squat with like 6 plates on each side, and I'm thinking, what the hell? But yeah, it seems like that would fit in a lot more. And then also, have you had any injuries in the ring, or like how do you work around like injury prevention? As you said, the next day you were sore, but that's probably from like muscle shock. What about like a body slam, for example? How do you sort of get rid of the aches and pains in the back for that? Like we were speaking before about maintaining a really strong core. I assume like you have to constantly maintain that strong core. But what other little things do you do to sort of prevent any injuries?
To be honest, I mean, to prevent injuries, stretching before a match is is the main thing that you can do, because if you go in cold, then you're gonna pull a muscle or something. But in terms of like taking slams and hitting the mat, it doesn't get any easier. I think your body just sort of gets used to the pain.
It's muscle memory, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when if we have been sort of not been able to wrestle for a few weeks, and you go back in, you take that first bump, you are sore. I just don't think it gets any easier. I think like I say, it's just a case of your muscles sort of get used to that impact. If you're taking it on a regular basis, you can cope with it better.
Yeah, I think in terms of recovery, like, you know, whenever we'd have a training weekend and I'd go into work on a Monday morning and I'm like limping into work, and they'd be like, "Oh, have you had wrestling again this weekend?" So yeah, it's it definitely does take its toll on you. In terms of injuries, we haven't really had that many injuries. I've got a bit of a dodgy shoulder from wrestling, but you know, you occasionally you do land funny, or you know, get twisted, like you've pulled a muscle or something like that. And it's not really, it is a physical sport at the end of the day. You're gonna get some. I know Rich has had a concussion,
a couple
from it.
Yeah, really.
But like, other than like in terms of physical injuries, luckily enough, we've sort of stayed quite clear of them.
Yeah, touch wood, knock on wood for that.
Yeah, definitely.
What was how did the concussion occur, and what was that like?
So that was from me bouncing my head off the mat. That was the first time it happened. The second time it happened, someone kicked me in the head. But these things they're not like unheard of. They are just one of those things. I mean, you're taught when the first thing you're taught when you go into wrestling is how to land to spread the impact. But sometimes in certain positions you're just not able to do it. And I kind of landed and it sort of whiplashed back, and my head hit off the mat. And so that was one time, and the other time was I was on my hands and knees, and it's just one of my opponents just decided it was a good idea to kick me in the head. But like I say, I didn't hold it against him, because it is just one of those things. It's, you know, it is a contact sport, so these things are going to happen.
You do get like other random sort of injuries which aren't too serious. One of the good things about being in a tag team is if you do get hurt in the match, you can just tag out and sort of recover a bit on the outside. So like we've had a match once where the guy's supposed to knee me in the stomach, and he jumped up and he came down and he timed it wrong, and basically he came over his full body weight and his knee into my stomach. And like, I was like completely like winded, and I couldn't catch my breath, and so basically I had to like drag myself over to him and like tag out. I just lay on the side of the ring. I couldn't even like get up until right at the end of the match. So,
but how do you like indicate that to like your opponent? Because from the outside, we've just seen the person do the move.
Yeah.
We don't know that he's done it incorrectly, that it's actually like fully injured you. So we don't know like, oh, he's genuinely hurt here. How do you indicate to like the other person, like, I'm fucked, mate, I need to get out? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I mean,
what conversation occurs there? Or is it simply a matter of you lying on the floor going, I'm fucked?
Almost, yeah. I think like on that occasion, he knew as soon as he did it, that it hadn't gone like to plan. But ultimately, like, when you're in there, there's quite a lot of communication between the wrestlers and the ref, and like you talk quite a lot in there. So it's just a case of like, if something's gone wrong, most of the time the other person will know anyway, but you just sort of tell them. Some people are a bit more obvious than others, but sometimes you just communicate it, because you do talk quite a lot in the ring. You just don't, the crowd aren't supposed to always see that though. So
yeah, I think like over the years as like more and more sort of behind the scenes sort of things have came out where you do see like the involvement of the referee, especially like how pivotal he is, because like I think is it the blade when people like get their head busted open? Normally he's the one that like hands them the blade and then they do the little incision. Is that correct, or am I? Have I just
Yeah, I think in the sort of the big shows in like WWE and that kind of stuff, I think that's how it works usually. Yeah, but I think the ref is essential really, because he can communicate messages from the back, from the producers or whoever's running the show. If they're not happy about something or they want to change something, they can communicate that to the referee, who can then communicate it to the wrestlers. So they do play a big part.
I think also I think also with the ref, like they're almost as like integral to the match as the wrestlers, because if someone's gonna be cheating, the ref has to like basically show the crowd that person's cheating by how they react. And and like we were saying earlier about people being theatrical and things, but when they're going to get a 2 count, it's nearly 3 and they're going to kick out. Like you see the way the refs react, like they really over exaggerate like the counts, like swing their arm loads when they're going to do the counts, and then there'll be 2 and they'll jump up and they'll like show everyone it was just a 2, and like they're like as big a part of that match as almost what the wrestlers are. How they react to what's happening in the ring is how the crowd react almost.
So you were saying before that like they can hear basically what the producers are thinking. So like when you're going into a match, like how much information do you know of how the match is going to pan out, and then how much is it of you just reacting to either the crowd or what the ref says in between? So like do you go in knowing like today we're going to win or today we're not, or do you go in knowing like right, today I'm starting and this is going to happen, then we're going to tag you out and then we're going to do this specific move, maybe we'll have like a down patch here and then we'll have the magic resurgence and finishing move, game done? Or is it like a lot more broad, like the first option?
So it depends completely on who you're working with. The outcome's always predetermined. So the promoter will come and speak to you and they'll tell you who they want to win. So that part's always predetermined. But the match and how it's put together, it depends on who you're working with. Some people prefer, knowing what's going to happen play by play, minute by minute. But some people will literally just say, well, we'll see you in the ring. And you just go out there and just figure it out. And I think people who have the ability to change a match based on crowd reactions, I think that's when you can really class yourself as a professional wrestler. I think when you're able to do that confidently and be able to just change things, just based on how the audience are reacting, is a real talent in itself, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Like, because if I always wondered that, because you when you see it, you're thinking how much of this is like in the moment and how much of it is like as I say, like the play by play. But what do you think your preference is, or is it the A side tends to determine? Like if you're going in with a much more experienced sort of wrestling tag team and they're considered like using boxing terms, the A side, I think it's a wrestling term as well. Are they normally the ones that get to say, right lads, use a new on the block, like we're going to do it like this way? Or do you get input in that as well? Do you get to say like, well, our preference is to just go in there and see what the crowd are saying? Or is it a discussion, or is it like whoever's got a higher rank can sort of decide?
I think it's always a discussion. I think you can almost, most of the time anyways, it depends on who you're on against, but I think it's always a discussion. But I think respect's a real big thing in wrestling. So, if someone's been doing it a long time, you kind of just listen to what they want to do and sort of go with it. You don't want to just let them sort of dictate the whole match to you. But I think out of respect, you kind of go with what they say for the majority of it. But in terms of preference, I think when you first start out or in your first matches, you want to know what's happening second by second, because you have to make sure the match is perfect, because you don't want to make a fool of yourself or anything like that. I think as you sort of get more experience, you're more comfortable to go out there and just see what happens, really.
I think for me, like my preference is probably knowing each other's like moves, what each other's preference is to do in the match, and then you basically just sort of see how it goes. And it's easier to communicate if you already know what the other person would like to do at some point in that match. But generally, like the one thing I learned, which I never really got it until I had a match with somebody, actually like a singles match, and they said to me, okay, so we'll, like, tell me a few things you'd like to do, and then we'll just see it, call it out there, because he was like much more experienced than me.
Right.
But one thing I learned in that match was, if you haven't planned it, you can't forget it, because if you've planned and you forget it, it can throw you, because you're trying to remember what you're supposed to be doing. But if you haven't planned it, then you don't have to worry, because you're thinking of it on your feet anyway. So I feel like it's a much more smoother match the less you plan.
Yeah.
I think when you're starting out and you have planned everything, you go out to a match and you forget it 30 seconds in, or something goes wrong and then you can't do what you planned.
Yeah,
it's the worst feeling, because you're standing there and everyone's looking at you and they're thinking, well, what are you doing? Because you don't even know what you're doing, and it's not a nice feeling at all. So definitely, I think to be able to improvise is really important.
From the smiles on your face there, I'm assuming this has happened, and you're talking from personal experience.
Yeah.
What was
that
that like?
Everyone, when you first start, I think everyone's gone through it at some point.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you end up basically just wrestling with roughly the same opponents the majority of the time, but like there'll be a cycle? Like we were speaking before about the era of tag teams of, like, it was Christian and Edge, Jeff Hardy, the Hardy brothers, and the Dudley boys. And like, I think another thing that probably you'll know this more than me, but because they were constantly in that little triangle and constantly against each other repetitively, they probably figured out each other's game a lot more. So do you think that that is another thing that happens, like when you are against the same tag teams over and over again, you sort of like, right, this is another day, we know these lads, we know what they like, they know what we like, and it becomes a lot more like natural, so you don't have to think about it as much?
I think when we're wrestling for WWE, which we primarily do, you get used to certain wrestlers, and what it becomes second nature. I think we were wrestling this one tag team going into our big show that we done at the Carrow Road Football Stadium, but we wrestled them, for about 4 or 5 weeks straight going into that event. And it just became like second nature by the end of it, because we knew what they were going to do, they knew what we were going to do, and it's just, we didn't really have to plan anything, we just went out and done it.
If anything, you're just planning how you're going to make it different, because you have to make it different. You can't just do the same match over and over again. So but it makes it a lot easier when you know that opponent, I think.
But then I think on the flip side to that, but when we've worked for companies, like different companies, not WWE, it's exciting. It's something different to work with someone new, and you can possibly learn something from them, and they have different styles to what you've been taught, because kind of at WWE we've all been sort of learned the same style. So I think it's always a good thing as well to work with someone outside of the bubble, and then learn something new as well.
So WAW is the one that you started off with Paige's parents.
Yeah.
So is that still going strong? And how many wrestlers do they have? Like what's the roster looking like with that?
So basically, they've just they're still going strong. They've just bought a new premises, which is like one of the best facilities in Europe, probably in terms of training facilities. And the company's still going strong. They've got quite a big roster. Their roster's sort of split, so they have Bellatrix Warriors, Female Warriors, which is like the women's brand of wrestling. But they also, because they're one of the only training schools that train sort of kids, so they've got an academy as well. And then they've got sort of an adults academy, which is the more sort of the sort of the greener, the novices like wrestlers, and then you have the elite shows, which is like the more experienced guys who have been doing it for years and years. So,
where do you fit in that hierarchy?
I think we kind of
flat.
we're kind of on the balance of the main guys and the academy. So we're just sort of somewhere in between. We kind of do both shows.
Is there many other sort of promotions? I think that's the correct terminology in the UK, or is it just like a couple and then they dominate most of the circuits?
No, there's pretty much a promotion in every city nowadays.
Right. Okay.
They're not all big promotions. Some only draw houses of like 12 people, but they're still promotions. And if they book you, as they're going to pay you, then obviously you take the booking. So, but they are, in terms of the real big promotions, there's I don't know, probably 5 real big ones in the UK. They're the ones that you really want to be working for if you want to get noticed by sort of the American companies and things like that.
Is there like a clear path sort of thing to like from like stepping stone to as you have said like before, like, and we were talking about the WWE like throughout, because I think it is the thing that most people think of when they think of wrestling. Is there like a clear stepping stone sort of like path to the WWE, or is it very much just you've just got to keep at it, and one day like a lucky break might happen?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the second one that you said. It's more a case of keeping with it, and it's about your brand. If your brand is well known within wrestling, your name's out there, then you've got more of a chance. But there isn't like a clear path of how to get there.
I mean, you can apply for tryouts with them. So even if you apply, you're not guaranteed to get a tryout. It's if they are interested in you, basically. If they feel like you're marketable, and if they can make something of you. So there is the option to apply for tryouts and things like that. But I feel like you need to know that you're ready, because you wouldn't want to get there and then not make it. You'd feel like you might play in your chance. In terms of like a lot of the guys who have got to WWE have been doing it for years, and they've gone through all the same things that all like sort of start like beginning wrestlers do, and where you're basically working for free, and you're training, and it's difficult because you're not making money, and like a lot of the guys, if you listen to a lot of their interviews and stuff, a lot of them have very similar stories when they're trying to make it. But I think you're right. It's about sort of keep going and keep sort of pushing yourself and getting your name out there. And then you've got to hope that you do get a lucky break, because when you think how many people in the world would love to be at WWE and how small that pool of people actually are, that's obviously takes some going to get there. So
yeah, definitely. Do they have a similar thing in the UK as they do in like as we were saying before, India, where they come over and do the tryouts? So I imagine that applications aren't for you to go over there, but for them to come over here and have like a UK sort of tryout thing.
Yeah, so they used to do the UK tryouts when they came over to do shows over here. They come over like 3 times a year, I think, to do shows at the O2 and Wembley and places like that. But I think it was a couple of years ago they launched NXT UK, so they've actually got a base here now as well. So I think they just do tryouts down there now. But that's obviously like another opportunity which could benefit us and other like aspiring wrestlers as well, because they've come to the UK and they've got a UK branch now as well.
But as you say, like you need to have your profile and you need to be fully ready. So like I imagine that if they're going through all these applications, it's probably, and they will probably look at other promotions to see other wrestlers, I imagine. So like if you apply and they've seen the name, the Fojis before, wherever it may be, but it's in their mind somewhere, then there's a much higher percentage of you getting a shot, I imagine.
Yeah, I think you have to have, although you can apply and say, oh, we've been wrestling, but you have to have something about you. If you've been wrestling for 10 years and you haven't got like a unique selling point, then they're not going to really. They might look at a promotion with someone who has got a unique selling point and then go for them. So although you can apply, I don't think it's like a shortcut or anything, because you still have to have something about you in order for them to be interested in you.
Yeah, like you were saying before, I think you said you have to be well-rounded. Like you can't, you'll get found out very quickly if especially nowadays, because I think everything's like sort of excelling at a rapid rate now. Like the levels are just getting higher and higher and higher. So you probably have to be very well-rounded. Obviously, you were saying we were talking before about you had a PT, and this year's obviously not went down to plan, because at the beginning of the year you got the PT, and then obviously all these lockdowns have happened. What impact is like the virus had on the wrestling circuit? Because I imagine a group of people inside is probably like at the last thing on people's mind at the moment. People probably think that it's like a horror show, like a group of people inside looking at like wrestlers who are sweating and all the environment's getting potentially polluted. So what's sort of the impact of like wrestling and things?
So basically, wrestling's basically come to a standstill. They almost got it going again, sort of, for about a month or so, but then obviously now we've gone into second lockdown. But like you said, it's just the setting is just not ideal for what's going on at the moment, and not just for the crowd, but for the wrestlers themselves, because if at the end of the day, no one really knows if they're carrying the virus or not carrying the virus, and for you to be rolling around in a ring, putting each other in holds, breathing on each other, like sweating, it's just not really safe, is it? So it's it's basically just brought it to a standstill. There hasn't been any wrestling. I know, like the bigger companies, so like WWE and stuff, they've continued, obviously without any audience. But
they can afford to do so. They can afford to do so, whereas I imagine
exactly.
Like at a grassroots level, like the funding won't be there.
Yeah, even then their wrestlers have had to like follow like strict sort of self-isolation and things like that between shows and that, because obviously they need to be sure that they're safe when they go back. But like you say, with like smaller independent companies, they can't afford to be paying wrestlers if they haven't got no crowds in, because obviously that's their income. So it's literally the UK wrestling scene is basically been non-existent this year. So I mean, us personally, we haven't wrestled since March now, so it's almost a year since we last wrestled. So yeah, it's definitely taken its toll on UK wrestling.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening in most basically sports, isn't it? It's like even like you see in MMA, like the UFC is able to put on these shows, but there's no audience. But I imagine at like a more like sort of grassroots level, like independent companies or small hall shows, will probably get stopped. And it's the same with boxing. Like I follow boxing quite closely, and Matchroom have been putting on like shows, and they had to do some Eddie Hearn's back garden. Do you know what I mean? Like, they couldn't do anything else, and even then they had to book out a hotel, have all the fighters who were coming in from this country and abroad get tested and in the hotel before like a Tuesday before the Saturday night show. And it's like, I imagine with the WWE, because it's the same roster of people, they'll just be like, well, if I've got you all in this bubble, there's no point in leaving. Just there's no point in risking it. And even then, like I think it was this past weekend was supposed on Saturday was supposed to be Dillian White versus Povetkin 2, and that got cancelled because Povetkin in Russia got COVID. He was in hospital. So like it's a crazy time we're living in. Like it's everything's up in the air. Do you think when you're going back into it, there's going to be any lasting repercussions of this, or do you think when everything is back to normal, then it's just straight back into it?
Yeah, I think it should just everything should sort of fall back into place again. I can't see there being any sort of long-lasting effects on wrestling. I think the only sort of thing that I would say is that a lot of companies probably have struggled during this period and probably shut down a lot of the smaller companies. So there might be like less promotions to go back to. But I think once wrestling's sort of back up and running again, and people sort of become more financially stable, I think more promotions will probably open up again, and things should sort of go back to normal.
It's not a nice thing to say, but do you think potentially, because you're with WAW, do you think, and they as you said, they're opening a new facility which is one of the best in Europe, so they seem to be like financially sound in that respect. Do you think because of there'll be less promotions around the country, as you say, from like COVID, it probably puts you in like a higher standing? Obviously, it's like it's not a nice way to think of like, oh yeah, the virus is benefiting us, but in reality, like people have benefited. Like any pharmaceutical companies benefited. Do you know what I mean? If they get the vaccine, do you think is like because you're already in with one of the bigger promotions in the UK that you could benefit potentially because there'll be less competition in that respect?
Yeah, I think being associated with a company like WAW is always a good thing, because they are, you know, a well-established, well-known company anyways. So yeah, I mean, with there being, I suppose there'll be sort of more people wanting to train with WAW and companies like that if the smaller companies have shut down. And already sort of being there and having a standing with them is always like a good thing. So yeah, I mean, like you say, it's not a nice thing to say, but if anyone can sort of benefit from, you know, this virus, then that's only a positive thing, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's an awkward thing to say because you don't want to look at like the silver linings, but you sort of have to. Do you know what I mean? Like you need to take any positive where you can, because otherwise there's enough negativity going around. Do you know what I mean? Like if you can take a positive, then surely you should. On a less depressing note then, because that hasn't exactly been the nicest little segment there. But speaking of this weekend, obviously White Pavecum was supposed to happen, but Survivor Series also happened, which was Undertaker's retirement. As you were saying before, you're massive fan of The Undertaker, and he also had a docuseries, The Last Ride. Have you been keeping up with that as well?
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah. It was. It's really weird to see The Undertaker not being The Undertaker, because he's never a broken character. So for him to start doing it now is really weird, but it's really interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I think for me, it was amazing to see just how committed he was to that character and to making that character work. Like he full on like dedicated his life to making sure that character was working and people believed in that character. I think that's like amazing to see. So like for him now, it must be a relief to be able to like be himself and not have to be the Undertaker. But yeah, I mean, for him to have got that character, because when you look at that character, for someone who doesn't watch wrestling, they'll think, oh yeah, he's like a dead man. Yeah, that's realistic. Like it's when you look at it like that, you think, how could he have possibly have made that character last 30 years and have people still be excited to see him? So like by far, like one of the greatest ever. Yeah, 100%.
I can't say I did watch like Survivor Series itself, but I did see a few photos. And is it Paul Bearer who was they made a hologram of him, and he did the kneel? I thought that was I seen the picture this morning when I woke up, and like obviously your childhood come back and you get like goosebumps and stuff. That was quite cool. And
yeah, it's a nice touch.
Yeah. There was there's a show that I seen The Undertaker on as he's doing like the press round for this week, and like he's authentically himself. I didn't watch the Last Ride, or haven't watched it yet, sorry. But he was doing have you heard of Hot Ones, where like they eat the spicy chicken wings?
I saw it advertised that he was doing it. I haven't watched it. No.
It's quite sick, to be fair. I watched that, and like as you say, it's weird to see him not as the Undertaker. And he admits himself that because he's been it for 30 years, like him doing the press round as not the Undertaker was weird for him as well. Because he constantly refused doing press because he wanted to have this mystique around around like his character, which was it is quite it's quite weird, because obviously you grow up with like this iconic sort of figure, and then eventually he's back to being mortal. And from Survivor Series and The Undertaker, there was a question before when we were speaking about gimmicks, And obviously, like, his overarching gimmick has been like the dead man, but he has phases in between. And as a fan of the Undertaker, what was your favorite sort of period of the Undertaker?
For me, I think the most entertaining period of The Undertaker was when he formed the Ministry of Darkness. I don't know if you remember that or not, but they had formed like this alliance, and they had like so many people involved, and they used to do like really crazy stuff, like tie people, or try and crucify people and stuff like that. And I think they've done it to Stephanie McMahon once. And I think that period of The Undertaker is probably the most entertaining period, because he done stuff where, although he was, the dead man and everything else, but he was doing some crazy stuff. And then I think after that, it was the period where he came back at WrestleMania 20, I think, to face Kane, I think, and when he returned as the dead man after the American Badass gimmick.
That was my favorite.
That period was really
American
was
Badass
it,
gimmick, It's he speaks about it in that interview as well, when he was like, because I think the question, the guy who was asking the questions was like, what's his favorite theme song? And he goes, I've had like a few good ones, but when Limp Bizkit played that live for the first time, and the pop and all the cheer of that, and I was like, that brought back memories for me, because that used to be like, I still have that song on one, like, my gym playlist, specifically just because it's the Undertaker's theme tune. Like, it's one of them memories. Definitely, it's similar for myself. So other tag teams, other wrestlers at the moment currently. I can't say I'm like clued up to the WWE at the moment, or any like wrestling, but who would you say is, because we've talked about previously and like when you were growing up, but who would you say is probably your favorite, split into two categories of entertainment and technically at the moment, who's wrestling?
One of my favorite people to watch, and I was very disappointed when they left the WWE, but obviously we can still watch them at AEW, is the Revival. I think they're known as FTR now, but their tag team matches are the most entertaining that I've seen in a really, really long time. They completely revamped the tag team. You know how we were talking about sort of the Hardy Boys and that era. I think the Revival sort of done it for this era, where they sort of elevated everyone else in the tag team division as well. The Usos were elevated, I think, because of sort of the Revival, and everyone else. There were other tag teams as well that had these really amazing matches with them. Mm-hmm. So I think they're like their team that I really, really enjoy watching.
I think they really changed the style as well. Like, they weren't about doing like flips and loads of kicks and things like that. Like, they wrestled, and they told stories with their matches, and like Rich just said, like their matches were the first tag team matches I watched in a long time, where I was like, what a match that was! That was like incredible. So in terms of tag teams, I'd say them and the Usos and the New Day, them three as different tag teams, completely different styles, but they definitely have like raised that tag team division and raised the bar.
Yeah, and then sort of going into sort of singles wrestlers, Kevin Owens is always fun to watch. I think he's really, really good. Seth Rollins. I'm a big Roman Reigns fan. I know a lot of people find that controversial because he gets a lot of bad press for whatever reason, but I don't think I can remember a bad Roman Reigns match. So I think he's on the mic. He's improved a lot as well. So
why do people dislike him?
I don't know. I think it's because he was positioned by the company to be the next main guy, and for some reason the audience is very, very strange nowadays. And like, as soon as there's a guy who's pushed, like they reject him, and they'll boo him. And the same thing happened with Cena before him.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it's like back in the day, good guys were good guys and bad guys were bad guys. But nowadays there's this blurred line where as soon as someone seems to be like, oh, the WWE wants to push this guy, fans will reject them, and then I just don't really get it. But that's just how it is.
I think for me, like currently in wrestling, like the best all-round person is and was for the last like few years is Chris Jericho. Like he's like on the mic, I don't think you can really get much better than him.
Yeah.
And also in ring as well, so good in the ring. And AJ Styles is another one who's a lot of, like, to be fair, we didn't used to watch a lot of independent wrestling and things like that, but so he's just so good, like so technically good.
For me, AJ Styles is probably the best wrestler in the world. I think, yeah.
What, on a technical side of things, or on entertainment above?
Everything. I think all round, he's absolutely the best. Yeah, I think anyone can have a match with him, and he'll make them look really, really good. But also, he can talk, he can do everything. I think he is.
I think that's the biggest thing for me is like one of the biggest signs of like being like one of the best is being able to bring the other person up to your level. That's one of the things like we're taught at wrestling, but to actually see someone do it on that level, to be that good and be able to bring other people up to their own level, I feel like that just like sets you apart.
Yeah, he is. I do remember him at his days at TNA as well.
He was in TNA,
yeah. That he was. He's really cool then as well. Him and Samoa Joe were like always had like a bit of a rivalry back in them days. And then I remember when he did move to the WWE, like I remember watching that episode like back on YouTube, and like I think because he was known for his TNA days, like the pop was a bit like extra when his like music came out, but it was dope. What about finishing moves for yourselves? Like, do you have individual finishing moves? So do you have a tag team finishing move that you have, and have you took inspiration from other tag teams when you were finding your finishing move, or was it something that you wanted to be authentically yourselves? And I guess it's hard to be original now, because like it's like everything's sort of been done, or well, everyone always thinks everything's sort of been done. So what was that sort of like to find your own finishing move?
So we have, like, wrestling's all about learning and sort of taking things from other people and trying to sort of adapt them and sort of make them original, even if the base move is already been done. So we have taken like little moves from other tag teams, especially like tag teams of the past, sort of like pre-Attitude Era, even way like before our time. Like it's all about educating yourself and watching like what's already been done and learning from that. And we have got a signature move. It hasn't really got much of a name yet, has it? But it's it's quite lucky because anyone who has seen it has said they haven't seen it before. So maybe we got lucky and it is something original because I hadn't seen it before. So yeah, we've had a few people from the States and that have come over and seen it and gone like, oh, do you know what? That's actually original. Like, we haven't seen that. So yeah, I guess we did pretty well to sort of think of something.
Is there footage of this finisher move online or anything, or like where can I see this, or are you gonna have to describe it to me for me to watch it?
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any footage online. So it's basically a catapult into an RKO. So when we say catapult, what we mean is, so one of us, doesn't matter who, will grab the sort of the legs of our opponent and sort of fall back and catapult them up, and the other guy will sort of RKO them. So there.
Back in the day, you used to see a lot more the catapult, where they would like sling them up, so they would like end up going into the corner.
Yeah.
And they would like hit their head into the corner. So it's that kind of a catapult. So like almost like a reverse like wheelbarrow. So they're on their back, you hook their legs up, and then when you fall back, your legs push them up. But yeah, then so sling them up, and then the other one RKOs them midair. So
that sounds very cool. To be fair, it sounds like something that you can like create your own move on like WWE, like on the game or something.
Yeah,
that's dope. That's dope. Yeah, that's pretty much it. What I like to do is at the end is just ask some quick fire questions. I haven't actually had two guests before, so maybe we'll just do this like one at a time, like we have so far. If that's cool with you. If there's anything else that you want to talk about, obviously I'll plug everything at the end. But is there any other topics that you think I've missed or want to touch upon?
No, I've enjoyed it. It's been good.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I'd say is that we've had a really good response from like the Asian community, the Punjabi community. You know, not just from in England. Like we get messages from people from India who come across our Instagram, or people from America. So it's really cool, like that people want to support you and want to see you like break them barriers and sort of open doors for people. And you're like, yeah, we've had like even a lot of like the Punjabi singers and artists and stuff have like tweeted us and messaged us, you know, saying like, it's awesome what you guys are doing. Like, it's so cool to see someone trying something different and like getting the, you know, the Asians into these sports where you don't really see them. So yeah, it's really nice to sort of see everyone sort of get behind you and want you to succeed.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that as well, Jesse Sidhu, like we asked him for permission to use his song "Sing" for our entrance music, which he you know, he didn't have no problem with it. He let us have it, and he's always like sort of he'll sort of comment on our stuff and say that, you know, when, you know, we're making people proud and things like that. So, you know, it's always nice to hear from someone in his position as well.
Yeah, I think I've seen that on one of your Instagram pages recently, with the music in the background, and it is like refreshing to see, because you, as we were talking about before, like you don't see many Indians in there. You don't see many Punjab. Well, the Indians that we have seen in the WWE, luckily for our personal pride as Punjabis, have pretty much all been Punjabis, but they sometimes do seem a bit gimmicky and forced, and none of them are like actually authentically like Sardars either. Do you know what I mean? So to represent like that one step further is always like cool. Do you know what I mean? Like there's always a barrier to be broken, even though it seems like most things have been done. You're just showing that like, nah, there's one more step that we can do. Do you know what I mean? Which is
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, 100%. As I say, like I've done a few posts recently and like educating myself on wrestling and like Dada Singh, because when I used to watch WWE, my dad used to always mention like, "No, Dada Singh would be one of these."
Everyone's dad's talking about Dada Singh.
Exactly. So I was like, "Yo, who is this Dada Singh?" Yeah, I need to Google this guy. But then when you get into it and you think we actually do have like a history in wrestling and being like strong sort of individuals and strong as like a sort of community, but not exactly represented in the places that we need to be, because I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe it's our community wants to be more like I don't know how to word this correctly without being very offensive, but I know, I feel like it's there's always like you want to do your work behind closed doors and not show it off in case
I think there's almost like an expectation as well, isn't there? The expectation in our community of what people should do and what kind of jobs they should have and how they should live their lives. And 100%. I think like I said, it's not like we don't see ourselves as like, oh, we're going to go and break barriers and, you know, open doors and stuff. But effectively, if we can succeed, that is what we're doing, and we're showing people like there's no like there's why not give it a go and try something different that someone hasn't done, because you never know, do you?
And it's so much easier to do something when you've seen somebody who looks like you doing it, like and not just for the merit of like the color of the skin or something, like not just because it's like a token brown person here. When you see someone who's legitimately enjoying what they do in a field that isn't the typical doctor, lawyer, engineer, then it's so much more refreshing. You're thinking, I enjoy that. As many kids like my age, when we were like all three of us were growing up watching the Attitude Era, thinking that's amazing. And then there's going to be so many kids right now looking at yourselves, Jinder Mahal, Great Khali, whoever it may be, thinking, yeah, that's me sorted. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm going to perceive. 100%.
Yeah, if one person can feel like that, then that'd be amazing if we can have that effect on someone. So
definitely. So we'll finish with some quick fire questions, and the first one is, what are you most proud of so far?
So we done a show which I mentioned at Carrow Road football stadium, which the crowd drew. I think it was over 4,500, which is pretty big for like an independent show. But yeah, basically, lots of our family came, friends came to watch that show. So that for me is like probably the most thing that I'm proud of.
And it was in the football stadium, so that's cool. Like, just walking out in a football stadium was like so like surreal. Like, you never think you're going to get a chance to do something like that. For me, one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that we've sort of stuck to our guns in terms of what we wanted our identity to be. Because like we've said before, like about the stereotypes and all that kind of stuff, there's like an expectation of what people expect from you in wrestling. And yeah, so I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of, that we've sort of stuck to our true identity of who we want to portray.
I think you answered this already, but what is your favourite memory of your career so far? Is it the Carrow Row show?
No, I think my favourite memory is probably of our first ever match that we had. Just the feeling afterwards, coming backstage, and Julia, so Saray and I was there, Paige's mum, and she like greeted us backstage and said how well we done. It was just a very surreal feeling to think, I've just had my first professional wrestling match. Like that's probably my favourite memory of wrestling.
Yeah, I think my favourite memory is the Carrow Road show, but sort of like in our entrance, so in the entrance, we got up on one of the corners, so we were both facing out on the same corner, and the side of the stadium we were facing was where all our family was. So we had like all our like direct family, but also all like our extended family, and all my friends were in that stand. So you're like looking out, and it's like thinking, it's mad, like to think they're watching me do this. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, it was the first time. So that was the first time that no, it wasn't the first time mum and dad had come, but a lot of the people who did come, it was the first time they saw us wrestle, and for it to be on a stage like that, that was pretty, like, I got goosebumps. Like,
Yeah.
Just looking at them.
I can imagine. What are you most looking forward to?
That's a good question. What am I most looking forward to? Probably just meeting more people, and talking to them about wrestling, because when we go out and do shows, it's hard to explain, but when you see little kids and they literally look at you like you're The Rock, like they're absolutely like mesmerized by you, like that is like probably the best feeling for me as a wrestler, is to give like someone else that feeling of being like wowed. So that's what I look forward to the most.
I think for me, what I look forward to is just getting to like get out there more and show more people, and basically like every crowd reacts differently to us, and every crowd, well, they react differently to every wrestler, but getting to see what reaction you get from them crowds. And like Rich said, like little kids, they tend to like love us because of our music and our wrestling gear and stuff like that. But in general, like you have such a mixed reaction, and like it's always nice to see what reaction you can get out of that crowd, whether they're supposed to hate you or love you. It doesn't really matter. That's what I look forward to, is seeing if you can get that reaction.
Getting a reaction, I think, is the most important thing. It doesn't matter how they react, but as long as they react. If you walk out to cricket, it's the most awkward thing in the world, because like no one cares, and you just think, oh, well, this is going to be fun. So yeah, getting a reaction is probably the most important thing.
Yeah. What is your biggest motivation? I say these are quick fire questions, but they're always proper deep. So like,
yeah, I think what we spoke about, my motivation is to prove that people that look like us can achieve something, because there's always like a reason not to do something, like, oh, we can't do it because of this, can't do it because of our girl, can't do this because of turbans, whatever. So for me, yeah, my motivation every time is that, just to prove to people that we can do it, it can be done.
Yeah, I think just like piggyback on that, really, just to prove that we can we can achieve something. And I mean, you know, if it gets to the point where we can do it as a full-time job, that's like the dream. But ultimately, that takes a long time and it takes a lot of hard work.
A lot of luck.
Yeah, and luck. So, you know, as far as we can get, that's what we're aiming for. You know, we haven't set ourselves any limits, or like any sort of, I wouldn't say unrealistic goals, but at the same time, you have to be realistic of what you feel you can achieve. So, you know, the opportunity is limitless, but it does take a lot of hard work. So, you know, however far we can get is like, that's how far we'll go.
Yeah. I think it's probably better to not have a limit, because then when you achieve that, you might end up getting like lethargic at that stage and thinking, oh well, we've reached like our mountaintop, and the next one could be even bigger. Definitely.
Yeah.
How did you celebrate your first major success, and what was that first major success?
Probably our first like belts, like so we had not been doing it for that long really, and we weren't expecting to have any belts anytime soon, and we've managed to, basically they put some belts on us, and that was like a surreal feeling, because like, you know, when you're young you have like the plastic ones that you like, when you're playing wrestling, and you have the plastic belts that you carry around with you and stuff, and then you get these proper ones which are like heavy and like, you know, and you actually win it and you're like standing in front of a crowd holding a belt, and that was probably like the first like big moment for us as a tag team.
We didn't really celebrate it. We had work the next day, so we had to just come home.
Come home tired. We got some pizza on the way home, and that was about it, really. Yeah. But yeah, like it's mainly, we don't celebrate it as such. It's just like, even after the Carrow Road show, it was just nice to sort of come home and like spend time with the family and just like get to see how, like, what their reaction was and how they felt like seeing us do that.
Yeah, just sorry, on a different sort of point, but I think that's one of the weirdest things about wrestling, how we do it, because we work full time alongside it, is that you wrestle one night and you have this high of like winning these belts, and then the next day you just get up and you just go to work. Like the contrast is so like much. It's really weird.
Massive.
Like Superman and Clark Kent sort of thing. Like
literally,
go back into work and you're unrecognizable.
Yeah.
What is your definition of success?
My definition of success is, if it goes back to the same sort of point, but you know, if people, you know, if we can make someone believe that they can achieve what they want to achieve, then that's us being successful. You know, getting to WWE would be the dream, not just WWE, obviously there's other promotions out there, but you know, make it to a high level in the professional wrestling world would be great. But success for me would be people to say, the Foji done that, you know, why can't we do it? So
yeah, for me it's just, success in wrestling is for people to know who we are and to know more about us, and even within our own communities, like across the country, for people to know, oh yeah, have you seen them two Singh brothers who are wrestling? And you know, just for us to be a bit more sort of well known through like the wrestling community would be a success, because that is a point of, there isn't really anyone like us in terms of our look and our culture and stuff, like in the wrestling scene. So you know, to sort of spread that and make people more aware of it, I think would be success for us.
And lastly, because it's the KultureKast podcast, how do you think your culture has affected you thus far?
In terms of wrestling or in general?
Like in life, in wrestling, however you want to take it, yeah. As broad or as narrow as you want.
So I think the difficult thing with our culture is that there's a lot of pluses to our culture, but there's a lot of negative points within the Indian culture too. No one likes to talk about it, but it's true. So I think to be honest with you, a lot of the culture actually hinders, a lot of people, and it contradicts the religion in a lot of ways as well. And so I think with the culture, you have to take the good points and celebrate the good points. But I think really our generation has to be the generation which pushes back all the negative points of the culture, and then we can move forward from there.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's important for us to stay in touch with our culture, but it doesn't mean that culture can't change. And we look at it with like fresh eyes, basically our generation. I feel to like the elders, and yeah, I think if we feel like something isn't right or something needs to change, I feel like we need to do that, and that in itself will break barriers for the next generation and make their lives easier, make their lives more productive in a lot of ways, I feel. But it is important not to lose touch with the culture, because that is who we are at the end of the day. That's our roots. And like we've said before, like we're proud of our roots, we're proud of our culture. And for us, in terms of wrestling, like that's given us a foot up, if anything, because that's what makes us like the Foji. Do you know what I mean? Like we are different. We are like Singh. We are Indian. We can come out with the Bhangra music playing. We can come out with the dole, and we've got the swords on our wrestling gear, and we wear shavanya, and everything makes us unique. So from a wrestling point of view, the culture's been a huge positive, I think.
100%, couldn't agree more. And for me, as like a person who's grown up watching wrestling as well, it's as I've already said, it is very refreshing. Not just like being able to see you guys excelling and doing what you're doing and like sort of proudly representing, but even more so to be able to talk to you as well, and for you to give me like an hour or two of your time, which has been really nice. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
No, it's been fun. I've enjoyed it.